Central School District Board meeting to order. The current time is 6:30. At this time, I would like us to go around and do introductions of board members, administrators, and staff. And Brian, I'm going to have you start.
Brian Bauer.
Mary Heather Noble.
Trisha Allen.
Jason Chance.
Eddie Fallis. Chip Malcolm.
Sophia Lawton.
Suzanne Buck.
Jamie McCallum. Steve Orzek.
Ellen Whelan-Wiest. Joanna Doria.
Barbara Wilson.
Wendy Baker.
Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Nicole Carter, Assistant Superintendent, Equity and Student Services.
Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning.
And could we check to see if anyone is coming in? As far as board members, okay. Next up on our agenda is a motion to adopt the agenda. Can I have a motion
I'll move to adopt the agenda as one.
and a second?
Second.
Okay,
Can
I need to,
Question.
yeah, you want me to do it, Chip, or you
Sure,
want me to?
I
Yeah, I need to make a motion to amend the agenda to include approval of the bills, which I accidentally left off. So I would like to make a motion that we amend the agenda to include approval of the bills. Can I have a second?
second.
Okay, discussion. All those in favor of this amendment to the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so now that's been approved, and we're back to the agenda. So I see Jamie, and we haven't been voted on the agenda yet.
Right. I would also like to make a motion to amend the agenda, just to include in the report back on policy about policy A21.
Can you repeat that again? I missed that.
Sorry.
I would like to make a motion to include a discussion about policy A21 on the policy portion of the agenda.
Report of the
Has-
board.
Do we have
Has
a
the 21 been warned?
It's not a vote on a change?
Has it-
Can
Is
you
it
maybe
included in the
explain,
packet?
you need to explain
So-
a little bit more what you're referring to so that we can then second it.
So, this is not how this works. So, the policy committee met on Tuesday. There's a policy that, the public comment policy, I thought I could just include it in the run-through of when we talk about the other policies, that there's no change to be made. We just sort of wanted to say that and get it off our plate. If that's not acceptable because it has not been formally warned, then I will withdraw that motion.
It's just a discussion, Jamie,
It's just a discussion, yeah.
right? Yeah, so let's make a second of this so we can have the discussion of it, and then we can then decide what to do with it.
a second?
Okay. So in this particular case, the policy, if I understand this correctly, I'm going to repeat, I think, what you said. A21 has not changed, right?
Correct.
And so you want to just have some discussion around it in order to state that fact of it hasn't changed?
Well, yes. At a previous meeting, I said that there was some interest in discussing this policy.
Yeah.
We did it, and now I want to tell everyone what we said, and that it did not change, and that sort of kicks it to the folks writing the procedure, which I believe is communication policy.
Yeah.
That's basically all I wanted to do.
Oh.
I just did it, actually. Sorry about that.
And so I guess, the question is, the floor is, can we include under policy this additional information-only discussion? Yeah, so any other discussion on this? And we'll just, go ahead.
I just
So the person that's on the Communications and Engagement Committee that's been tasked with drafting a procedure, I actually would find it helpful to have a little bit of a discussion, not a lengthy one, to see if there's anything. I've already drafted it and sent it to the chair, but there could be opportunities for me to add or adjust things, so then when it comes to our committee, we have more to go on.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I agree,
So-
it would be beneficial.
So in this particular case, this isn't a violation of warning or anything like this. It's just adding a topic under policy.
For
which-
discussion.
For discussion, right? So, Suzanne?
So, but if the board doesn't have a copy of the policy,
I will email everyone a link to the policy now. Would that be helpful?
And it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
I,
Sure, they're public, like they're publicly
Yeah, it's just
adopted
available
policy.
On the website.
Right. And this is really no different when we go around the table and we're,
well, that's the question. is
Yeah.
whether That's the more appropriate forum, but
Yeah.
it seems like such a.
yeah, in this
minor
particular
thing.
case, we only had policy with these two on there because it's the shortened
Right.
report of the board. The next meeting, we would have all of the committees listed, which this would have been a natural thing to speak about. So I think this just formally puts it on there. Yes, go ahead, Jason.
Is the intention of the next board meeting to vote on it,
On 821?
or the H1, like re-adopt H21?
No,
No.
no,
Yeah.
no. Not that I heard,
Yeah.
I think so, no.
right. Yeah, so as long as it's not a warning issue, because we can't, put it on here based on that. Personally, I think we're okay, but any more discussion, we'll just do a vote to formally do this. We're practicing motions to amend, so that's a good thing. It's all good. Okay, are we ready for the question?
Yeah.
There's a motion to amend the agenda to include under policy a general description on A21. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Phew, okay.
Now we have to vote on.
Now we need to, okay, so now, if there's no objection, the agenda is approved as corrected,
As amended.
as amended. Well, in my case, yeah, you're right, thank you. It takes a village. Next, we have, now that we have the agenda, public comments on agenda items, and this is the time we invite the public to comment on agenda items. For those who would like to speak on other items, we have another agenda item later. If you are interested in making a public comment, please raise your hand. And if you're participating online, it looks like we just have MCTV. You would raise your Zoom hand. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I'll start here in the room. Any public comments? Mary?
I'd like to comment on policy 821. That has just been added to the agenda for discussion. But in all seriousness, this is a moment where I have not had time to look at the agenda, and that would be the case for most members of the public who it's very difficult to find the agenda, know it's been updated, look at it when you've published it, and then come prepared knowing what you want to talk about. I've suggested in the past that the agenda be showed so that people know what they can connect to if they want to provide a public comment, and I would like to make that suggestion again for those of you considering procedure. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none. Next, recommendation to approve the May 28th board meeting minutes and the June 1st board retreat minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Okay,
Second.
and a second? If there's no objection,
Can I ask a question?
yes, you may.
Are we approving them together? I ask because I would have to abstain from one, but I could vote on the other.
Yeah, I'm gonna just do it as
As a package?
a package, if that's okay,
Yep.
unless there's an objection to doing that. So if there is no objection, the minutes are approved as submitted. Okay? Our condensed Robert's Rules procedures. Okay, so next,
Bills.
approval of the ACSD bills. I have it on my script.
Okay,
I just
want
didn't
to
do it
have
on
it in
the
order
agenda.
before students.
Yes.
No, I mean, it's not on the agenda, I know, if you got it on the
Everything's very
script, that's
relaxed
great.
tonight. I have it on my script, I didn't screw
We're
that up.
procedurally challenged here, so, okay. Reading the bills on the 3rd of June, Jason and I read them. What general account of expenses, $832,434.68. And again, 532,000 of that, in a broad sense, of that 832 was for health and dental. We seem to do this almost every month. A lot of money.
We're done.
Huh?
Yeah.
The second is a payroll voucher for $988,551.78. There were no issues. Any that were there were answered, and so I'll make the motion to approve the bills.
Any discussion?
Chip, can you just restate the date that they were read?
June 3rd.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the bills as reported, please indicate by, I don't have to do this, I'm sorry. I'm going to say, if there is no objection, the bills are approved as reported. Sorry. Old habits die hard. Next, report of our student representatives.
Okay. So we've had a lot of sports going on with playoffs, and so boys lacrosse is going to the semis. Baseball is also going to the semis. And in exciting news, track and field is finished 6th overall. We had our final assembly last Friday. Lots of people got awards. We walked, I think, across town and past the elementary school. We had graduation, which Eddie will talk about. We had our celebration of learning in the Career Center with we had a lot of finishers and partial finishers, juniors and seniors who finished their second year of coursework, or in the design, you only have to take one year of the course to finish. And then we had 8th grade move-up day where the peer leaders showed them around the school and did a bunch of activities to make them comfortable in the school. We had the IB diploma ceremony and the raft race, which senior stuff.
Yeah, there was senior week, a lot of fun stuff. Most of you were at, or at least quite a few of you were at graduation, so it was pretty typical, pretty smooth. If you've been to a graduation, it was probably exactly like that. Also, Caitlin Steele reached out to Sophia and I about starting the process of getting a new student rep selected. I have no idea where she is on that process. Not being in school, I don't keep up with that quite as much anymore. But this is my last meeting, so from now on, Sophia is the one here, and I would like to thank you all for a great 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just make a comment relative to the parade. The symbolism in that is pretty heavy, I think. Number one, education is so important, and for us to close off the major corridor in western Vermont while we march on Route 7 is pretty important, okay? Number one. And number two, just having marched in that a lot of times, walking by all those 350 kids sitting on the curb in different age groups, it just brings a tear to your heart. It just basically says, this is why we do what we do. This is the whole spectrum. So symbolism is important, and I was struck by it as I have always been struck by it. So after Eddie's talking about the parade, I said, okay.
Mary Heather?
I just would like to also add, graduation went very well. And I just want to thank Dr. Baker for her comments. I thought your speech was really thoughtful and landed well, certainly around the people I was sitting with. So yeah, thank you for that. I think it was a really nicely done ceremony.
Thank you. Hopefully Eddie feels that way too.
Steve?
2 years ago, I came to the board after graduation and said that I was disappointed that only 3 board members were there for the graduation. This time, I wanted to note that almost everyone was there, and I was very, very pleased with that result. It was nice to see that much support from the board, to see us all there. So, thank you.
I agree.
That was definitely noticed by administration
Yes.
also, and you made them feel very valued by your collective presence in that way, so that was very appreciated.
Yes. Yes, I felt very proud looking out and seeing all those cheers.
We were tightly packed.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Barbara, you did a good job with your two-handed shaking.
Oh, I know, that was hard. We didn't practice that too well. And I was like on the fly, it was just like, okay, how do I do this and not be in the way so that the picture could be taken? So.
Or the checks don't fall out of the diploma.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So as you can see, I was adjusting as I went. So then finally by the end, I thought I had a flow, but it took a while.
All worked good.
Yep, thank you.
I think Suzanne.
Okay, Suzanne?
I would just like to take the opportunity to thank Eddie for the last 2 years. He's brought some really great reports from the high school, and he's done a really wonderful job. And I wish you well in Florida. I'm not sure why you're going to Florida where alligators live, but okay. Just don't try to play with one, okay?
Yeah.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Yes, and I want to just thank you too for really being part of the board and your valuable insights and being willing to share those insights. I really appreciate that and wish you the very best.
Thank you.
And if you're ever visiting, you could always come and visit.
Yeah.
You visit.
Well, he lives here still, so.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Visiting from college, but we'll be here.
Yes.
Any other comments? Okay, great. So next we have report of the superintendent. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Baker.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're up and running, you know, and the team is busy into all of it, trying to land the plane of the end of the school year and, you know, and then move into summer, which, as you know, is a busy time, really busy time. So I just thought, you know, 2 things might be useful to highlight. I mean, a question this time of year is, you know, where are we in hiring, right? How many vacancies do we have? What does that look like? You know, where are we at this point? So I think actually, you know, that that if you add up everything, it might add up to 25 at this point, or it might still be at 24. That's how fluid we are in that respect. Most of the positions that you see are well in process. There are a couple of exceptions that I just wanted to draw your attention to because they're things that we think about. Yes, thank you, Matt. One of them is the SLP vacancies. You know, we are in the process now of brainstorming how else to fill those needs. You know, and so we'll see what that looks like, and we'll keep updating as we go.
Remind me of what SLP stands for?
Speech and language.
Pathology.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, those those needs are generally documented through individual educational plans, and so we want to make sure that, you know, we've got those taken care of, and we're doing a little bit of a pivot brainstorm about how else we might manage that. Nicole obviously leads that work, and so more updates on that. School counselors is also an area that is, you know, we haven't gotten to the place where we're ready to do pivots, but we're close to thinking about what we need to do differently. And what we're finding there is that there are almost no applicants, which is unusual. That's definitely, you know, unusual. I don't know if that's something that's being experienced across the state. Do either of you know that? Yes. Okay. So I think, you know, we may have to think about how to manage that. There are a couple of options available to us, I think, and we'll just see. We'll let that one go a little while longer and see where we are with that. The other one I want to draw your attention to is the classroom teacher piece. You see that 2 of these openings are classroom teachers whose assignments are in Shoreham and Bridport. Obviously, we're in principal transition in both of those communities, and so we're working with Courtney particularly to make sure that there's continuity in those processes and that we don't lose any steps in pulling teachers into those positions. So I just wanted to assure you that's happening. So that was just sort of where we are. To me, from what I know, this doesn't feel like a lot of turnover. This feels like an acceptable rate of positions to be hiring into for an organization of this size at this time of year. It feels very normal to me, with the exception of those, the SLP and the school counselor circumstances, certainly. So, any questions about that?
Okay, so Jason and then Steve.
I'm just wondering, for the hard to fill positions, do we have any sort of, I don't know if this is possible, like, you know, tracking so that you could, you know, help someone with professional development and like maybe take a different career track from what they're doing currently into the SLP role or into a school counselor role? Do we do that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is yes. And that's even still a little bit challenging, but that's how probably we would end up considering on one level, you know, working our way through that, especially the school counselor piece. I mean, you know, you could see taking somebody who maybe is a health teacher and thinking about, okay, how can we reconfigure these responsibilities so that we can pull someone in that respect in a creative way. And so that's the kind of creative thinking that we might do. Yeah. Steve?
SLPs, the entire time I have been in education, SLPs have been very hard to find. And it's a difficult position to fill, let alone fill 5 of them. So it's not anything the district is doing, in my opinion. It's just hard to find SLPs.
Especially now.
I
think Vermont is having a huge.
I think nationally it's a problem.
So I'll keep you apprised as we keep going, you know, and you know, we'll have probably, you know, paraeducator hiring is probably something that we really won't have a finalization on, maybe even until August, you know, until like new students come in, we're sure we understand where all the student needs are and so on and so forth, but you know, professional staff, you know, we hope to obviously be very far along the way of fully staffed. Shortly. Although my first teaching job I was hired for in August, actually. So, at you as well. So yeah, it's so clearly, you know, very good candidates. So the second thing I wanted to highlight for you is really good work that's been done on the part of Courtney and Nicole, particularly in partnership with building level principals and others, you know, as well, that really takes a look at how are we accounting for contracted non-instructional hours, you know, which is time, obviously, that's in the master agreement, where the teachers, in this case, are not either providing direct instruction for students, or on planning time for that, you know, so that's contracted into their work. So if you want to pop down in here, we just took a look at the way that non-instructional time is currently set to be accounted for in the next school year, as just a way for us to take a look at what are the types of activities we're asking our professionals to do, and what's the balance of that time? Like, how long does it really take to get all the mandated training done? You know, exactly. And I think it's interesting to note that these are all trainings that are mandated, you know, by state or federal law. And so, you know, that's 5.5 hours. So that's almost a whole day, you know, of time. So when we're talking about trying to move things ahead and balance all the priorities, obviously that's something that we have to attend to. You know, we can't change that. The column to the left of that, professional activities by teachers, those are pieces that are set in the master agreements. Those are the days that teachers need to have available to them to unpack their classrooms, for example, and, you know, make changes between semesters at the high school. They're not available for professional development activities that are advancing their practice, other than the ones they would choose to do in those particular days. You know, so that's also, you know, a number of days, almost 3. And then, you know, you can see there's integration of practices versus new content versus professional development that is really about working together to make the buildings run well, or to, let's say, move strategic planning initiatives ahead at the building level, you know, through staff meetings or things like that that come up that are specific to the learning communities that are out in the individual schools. So I just thought this might be of interest to you, you know, so that you can see how we're quote-unquote spending that non-instructional time for professional staff. Any questions or thoughts about that? It's obviously been a tremendously busy week, a successful week, I think, you know, in that we are crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's well, you know, so it appears. So that's good. You know, this is just a couple of placeholders to share with you.
Thank you, this is helpful.
Jason?
Sorry, I just wanted to go back to the hiring thing for one sec. Because we got some feedback this year about Mary Hogan's kindergarten and first grade challenges. And some of the feedback we got was they were not prepared at the beginning of the year, and they were still sort of ramping up staff and bringing people along. I just want to know that there is a clear path of trying to avoid that this year.
Nicole, do you want to talk about the pre-K transition work particularly?
Yeah, Jen, myself, Courtney, Tracy, am I missing anyone?
Meg.
And Meg Baker, all have spent most of the year better understanding and getting feedback about what was and wasn't working from various people. And we have the way students will be placed in kindergarten will change, and that will be more similar to what they do in the other 2 districts in our area, giving teachers an opportunity to get to know kids in person and see them and be with them before determining that. We've got play groups happening this summer. Jen has worked really hard to figure out different places where she can push in more opportunities for parents and kids to connect with her, with the school, and with teachers. We also, though Meg Baker's leaving us, so it's heartbreaking because she's so fabulous, she worked really hard this year to develop a data system so that we can very easily see who needs extra supports from the beginning in a way we didn't have last year. So I think we're hoping that those 2 pieces will make a difference.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, that's all right. And now the appointments and so on the agenda, there reported the superintendent, the personnel items. So we need a motion to accept the appointments and resignations. Can I have a motion? Suzanne.
I'll move to accept the appointment of Hillary Collier and accept the resignation of Matthew Alford, Ashley Kapik-Desora, Mark Dudzek, and Madeline Fuller.
Can I have a second? Jason, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the resignations and appointments as read by Suzanne, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions and any nays? Okay, thank you. Next up is report of the chair. So I have several items here that I want to run through. The first one is some discussion around next year's meeting schedule, which is from August through June of 2025. In doing that discussion, I'd like to talk about how to handle certain dates where there's a holiday that falls on it, or a week that school's out of session, which is more often than not. And then also discussion around location. So first, there's the following dates, and I'm going to list them, fall on school break weeks if we continue with the 2nd and the 4th Monday. November 25th, that board meeting, December 23rd, and February 24th. Those are all weeks where school is not in session. And so what I'd like to do is get guidance on how we should handle that as a board, so that then Darcy can get this scheduled in the system, okay, on the calendar. So let's first talk about November 25th. So that's the week of Thanksgiving. Any thoughts on how we should, handle it? Options are we don't have a board meeting, or we continue to have the board meeting, or we select the time the week before. Any thoughts? Suzanne?
So, is the 25th, so the 25th is the following Monday.
Yeah, that's the Monday of
Monday of Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
It's before Thanksgiving.
So we're also right deep in budgeting.
Yep.
So I think that we somehow need to fit in 2 meetings. If we went the 11th and the 18th, I don't know, but I think with budgeting, we need to.
Yeah. Tricia's first, then Mary Heather.
For the board, I don't know, straw poll or whatever, do people foresee not being here the Monday of Thanksgiving?
No, I'll be here.
I mean, the Monday of Thanksgiving is a normal work day for me. I
Sure.
don't know that it's.
Yes, yep, and that's fine, and I'm good with that. I just want to give people input, allow you to have input on this. Chip. And, Mary Heather first.
Sorry,
and then
I'm
Chip.
sorry. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is I believe what we've done in years past is we've bumped it the week before, so that folks who are traveling don't have to, change their travel plans or interrupt their travel plans. We've just moved it the week before so that we've met 2 consecutive weeks.
Right. How do folks, Chip, go ahead and then we'll
No,
talk.
I was going to substantiate Tricia's comments. I think this particular day is generally, except for maybe people are traveling, our main problem is, do we have a quorum, a sufficient quorum, not just a basic quorum?
Right.
So if we don't, well, I guess it's a problem. But I think most people that are traveling Thanksgiving time are traveling because their kids are off.
And
I
family.
expect, so
Yeah.
but I don't have that. So.
Yeah. And so go ahead, Steve.
You pointed out that it's during budget season. It would seem to me, given the chaotic nature of the information that we get during budget season, that it might be better during that time to have the meeting the week after rather than the week before, because the longer we wait to get information, that would put us on December 2nd, and then we would have December 2nd and December 9th would be back-to-back meetings. So it wouldn't, it seems like it would interfere less with the holiday, and it would also give the Finance Committee and Matt a little more time, and the state to get their act together because they are historically bad at providing information. So I would suggest that perhaps December 2nd might be better.
Okay, so Ellen, and then we'll go over to Tricia and Jason.
Just to go back to Tricia's point, do we need to move it? I think actually December 2nd, I would argue that then you're asking Matt or others to work or have something looming over them Thanksgiving week potentially. If that's just the Monday after a holiday weekend, I know we're trying to predict the future and we can't predict the future, but we're never complete. There are very few meetings when all 13 of us can be here anyway. If November 25th feels like a critical mass of us would be here, do we need to change the schedule?
Okay.
Barb, I have like a model that I was looking at where if you do 3 in September, because you have 5 Mondays in September. So if you did every other in September, then that would set you on track to do October 8th and 22nd, and then November 4th and 18th, and then December 9th and 23rd.
October 8th and 22nd are Tuesdays.
I think that's great, but I'm not sure I want to make that drastic of a change at this point in time. So, great idea.
Mondays.
Yeah, so I think at this point, I'm thinking that we keep it the 25th. Understanding that, obviously that doesn't give you quite as much time, but you don't have it looming over Thanksgiving either. Is that okay with folks? Okay.
Some of them.
Yeah. And then for December, the 23rd, which is the week of, all the kids are off for the holidays. Do we want to, in this particular case, I'm thinking we might want to move that one up to the, 16th.
I would agree with that.
And I think we've done that.
Yeah.
We've done that. Matt, when's the letter that's due from the state in December? Is that due by the 12th? The 1st?
First,
Okay.
if we can only,
If it only shows up.
yeah, exactly. And so my suggestion, if folks are okay with that, is that we move that up to the 16th. Okay? And then the February meeting on the week of the 24th, I'm good at keeping that. It's we've oftentimes have had it during the time when kids are off, and folks participate if they can, or Zoom in if they need to. Suzanne?
Question. So would that not be the same week that we are required by law to hold an annual meeting?
Oh, it is.
So
it
if
is.
it is, could we not have a short regular meeting before the annual meeting and do it all in one night?
That's a good point. We could definitely do that. Does everyone understand what Suzanne just said?
Oh, is that because the election is Tuesday the 4th?
Yeah, that's a
And
very
as
good
by
point.
state statute, we have to meet within so many days of
Yep. So,
town meeting.
and we've done that in the past where we've had a board meeting, if one is needed. It may be that we don't need one and we end up canceling it and not holding it. But if we do need a board meeting, that we would have it in front of the annual meeting. So I'm going to note that. So that'll be what we put on the schedule. And then the very last one I want to point out is Memorial Day, which is obviously a holiday. I was inclined to put in the calendar just the 27th, so it'd be on a Tuesday like we did this year. Is that good for everyone? Okay, moving on. The next thing is the topic about where we hold our board meetings, and in the past, on a monthly basis, we would rotate between the various schools. We have 9 schools, and so that means 9 months, because we would basically select one of the meetings each month to be at the various different schools. If we were to do this, I would recommend that we do it on the first Monday meeting, only because there's more conflicts with kids being off, schools being off, and it'd be harder to make sure that we got to every school, if in fact we did it. And we really need to start as soon as September in order to get through all of the schools, because having one in June doesn't feel like it would be productive to me, up through May. So what are folks' thoughts on this? I'm going to open it up for some discussion, because it's all of our board meeting. Jason.
We have a lot of people who watch these board meetings after the fact, way more than attend. And it makes the recordings very difficult to hear them, makes them very inaccessible when they're recorded without that device, without the owl. So I'm all for changing up the venue, but the recordings have got to be good and high quality, because they are used for sure by hundreds of people watching every weekend. So.
Okay. Chip.
I've always taken the position that I don't like going out to schools. I know politically there's all this pressure to do that, but yet relative to the times that we've done it over the years and the number of people that have shown up for us coming to their school, principal, somebody else does those kinds of things. I think it's much better to have a much better system that you can get the recording out to the public and they can watch it directly. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I'm stating my piece.
Yes. Sophia.
Just for the student representatives, it just makes it a little bit harder to get there.
Thank you. Eddie.
While I think what Chip and Sophia have said is good to consider, I remember going to one, I think it was in Salisbury last year, and they had students who were very excited to present stuff that they had been working on. They had maybe not like a whole bunch of community members, but I think just the students actively engaging with the board and that stuff makes it worth it. I think that's a good way for the board to actually have a connection with the schools in their district, especially the smaller elementary schools that often get less attention focused on them in terms of the student experience rather than the costs of orchestrating them. I think it's just a really good way for the board to stay engaged with the whole community. You represent the entire community. I think it's a really good way to get out of this perception that I think a lot of outlying towns have about this potentially being a more Middlebury-centric group. It's a really good way of distancing yourself from that reputation. So I would advise strongly that you continue visiting the schools.
Tricia.
Well, and I think I take in what everyone has said, and I agree that the recording issue is a legitimate issue around access, but I'm loving Eddie's point and really feel that, even if we decide not to have our meetings travel month to month, it would then be really important for us to figure out another mechanism to have our presence in the schools. And obviously the drawback to that is that it's another 9 somethings added on to our schedules. So it falls into, we're trying to figure out what we can do to engage our constituency that's meaningful, productive, and sustainable. And so the sustainable issue is what we run into. If not this, then what?
Okay, Jamie and then Mary.
I've always liked it. I've always taken that position. I understand all the things. There was the recording, I agree. I would love to know how you know that hundreds of people watch these meetings.
You can tell. MCTV.
They log it?
Yeah.
Hundreds? That's amazing. Anyway.
Jim can tell us that.
Thank you. I think it's just a great, I don't know, I really like doing it. But Eddie's point, I take to heart about, it's and Tricia, what you said, an opportunity for engagement. I think there's times when certain experiences at schools were more like useful to us as board members, and it may be worth our while to sort of put word out to principals or building folks, being like, we're going to come to your school on this day. Here's what the kinds of things we might like to engage you with, or kind of, I don't know, to kind of help make that experience a little bit more substantial. But ultimately, I would totally support the traveling meeting.
Mary Heather?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think just from a communications and engagement perspective, it's something that we always are working on, always chasing that horizon of it being enough, being good enough, being frequent enough, and it really is an easy thing to return to. And it does, the other thing that we have to consider is that perception is reality. And the perception certainly is that, the board just sits in Middlebury and conducts its work, and we are representative of everybody in ACSD, and I think it's imperative that we show up for everybody in ACSD. So I wholeheartedly agree with Tricia and Jimmy and folks who support it.
Okay, Steve?
I think I've said this a number of times. School board meetings are for us to do our work, and if you think there's extra room in our schedules, I don't think you've been paying attention. And when we carve out an hour, in some cases, for a school presentation, which, frankly, I'm going to talk for principals. They hate it because it's a dog and pony show that they have to organize, and that they have to come up with their already busy day is now they have to carve out something else. And I get something from those, as you're saying. I get a lot more from going to the schools and participating in actual activities at the schools. Graduation being a good example, participating in the 10th grade projects over at the high school, going to actually participate in activities at the school rather than have the board sit here and watch a dog and pony show. And excuse me if that term makes people upset, but if you want to engage with the kids, you should be doing that outside of the board time. I worry that we spend that this kind of seems to say that what we do as a board is superfluous and that we need to be watching what's happening in the schools. I look at these agendas when I look at the meetings, and they're pretty jam-packed. I don't see fluff in there. And so it feels like that going to the schools to see presentations feels like it's carving out time from what we need to do. I don't object to going to the individual schools to hold our meetings, as long as the format stays the same as it is here. That we are conducting the board's business while we're doing that, and that we solve the audio-visual problems, because those were terrible. And until we can solve those problems, then we really are hurting ourselves by going there and not being seen and not being heard. But
And Chip, and then Eddie.
Just on procedure, if in fact we go to schools, I don't know who that is, whether that's you or Matt or I don't know who it is, but the structure of how we even sit, okay, needs to be standardized. No, I'm not kidding. I don't mean sit, but I mean, if you're in a big gym and you're spread out in this whole long thing, each of those schools is very different. And I found it extremely awkward at times for us to have this kind of a normal discussion on business. So if there's a set format, maybe superintendent, I don't know who that is, but I mean, I think I could live with that, but the set format to me, and I honestly, I agree with Steve that our business is our business and we need to do it.
Eddie, and then Ellen.
First, I think there are a lot of good concerns that should definitely be taken into account about improving how those meetings go. But one thing that I think needs to be stressed is, just again, the people in every single part of the district are the ones who vote on the budget and everything else. This district is extremely lucky to have a budget that passed this year in the first place. And I think all of you as board members really owe it to every single person to engage with their community. Not just in the business you do, but also in the other stuff. And like Steve, I love what you said about going to the schools, but then you listed 2 events that happened at the high school and none that happened at elementary school. So maybe there are some that you've attended there too. But I think it's really important that every school gets seen, not just Mary Hogan or MUMS or Middlebury Union High School, who have the much bigger student populations. And with that being said, I think the board should just be very cautious of the perception that it's going to send out to cut another thing that you used to do with smaller, more rural schools. There will be people who will feel very like underrepresented, underappreciated, and kind of left behind by the board if that happens.
Thank you, Eddie. Ellen?
I think it sounds like there's less differences between us about the whether or not to go and more of the how. Sort of how do we go and make sure that the quality of the recordings are maintained? How do we go and make sure that the board has the time that we need to do our work without overburdening the schools? How do we go and make sure that the arrangement is consistent? And I wonder if we could move to agree to doing this and then not to shunt work onto a committee, but ask the committee on engagement if you all would take some of the feedback and we could offer them our memories or whatever and ask those of our colleagues to sort of take a lead on determining the how of this so that those concerns can be addressed and we can still meet the spirit of being more visible and more connected with the community.
Yeah.
Suzanne?
So would it be possible for the board even to consider fixing the audio piece? Because yes, I have tried to listen in at some schools and it is horrible. But maybe do like some of the principals used to do. They would do like a meet and greet with coffee. And sometimes they sit in the parking lots or whatever, but maybe if we said the board meeting started at 6:30, at 6 o'clock the board will be there with coffee and goodies for anybody that wants to come and chit chat or whatever. Food brings people out. And then maybe they might stay, but at least we're in a school, we then do our business, we've given them an opportunity to meet and greet and drink coffee or tea or just a glass of water with them. And it's something different. We haven't done that before other than at our big public meetings where we're actually bringing them in and asking for information. This might be a different way to try it.
Yeah.
Okay. Tricia?
Well, and I'll say that's definitely something that the Communications and Engagement Committee has been tossing around. And I think if we do take the step to say, yes, we're going to travel around, then yeah, that's absolutely on the table. And feeds into, I think, what Ellen was saying about it's really looking at the how. It's not the, yes or no, do we do this? It's the, okay, well, how do we get it done to make it work? And yes, Communications and Engagement Committee has already started thinking about how we could possibly make this work for everyone.
And so, Dr. Baker, would it make sense to talk to the principals to get any of their input as far as what they would like to present?
We'll take care of that. I mean,
Okay.
I've heard what you've said. We'll take care of the operations, ensure that it's okay.
Okay.
We'll take care of we have a board, we have a leadership retreat in August. We can kind of get a sense as to what might be helpful and important to them and also meaningful to you in terms of making the most of the opportunity. I actually think they're filled with pride about the things that go on in the learning communities that they oversee every day, and I think I would disagree a bit with Steve in that I think they probably would really welcome your presence. And in terms of congruence, I think the district team will say that I certainly have probably had a more outward focus, I was in almost all of our buildings in the first week to do meaningful work, and they've been in the buildings, and I think we just need to be out and about, you know, and there really isn't much substitute for actually being in an environment and talking with the people there, you know, and I always am surprised about how much I learn when I do that. I think I know exactly what's going on from the office, and then I get out in the building and I realize, aha, you know, there's something important to uncover here that's always unexpected. So I think it would probably be well worth the effort, and we will make sure that it happens and happens well.
Right. Okay, Jason.
I would just make one suggestion, that if there's like a student presentation or something, that we not make it part of the agenda so they have to sit through like approving minutes and bills before they do the presentation. Can we have that be like before the meeting starts? Just have it be informal and like student presentation starts at 6, board meeting starts at 6:30.
Right. And that was kind of my thought, you know, when I said the principals, but I would love to kind of have a consistent way at each school and not have one an hour and one 15 minutes, that kind of thing, and working maybe with communications engagement. We could use that beginning time to do that as well. I think anything's possible here.
Yeah, if communication and engagement is a committee that is kind of a good place to hash out a plan for what this would look like, I think we could pretty effectively put something new and different together that everyone would find value from. And so we'll make sure to do that.
Excellent, thank you. And looking at the calendar, I don't know if that September 1st meeting, you know, the first board meeting in September is too soon.
Nope, not
Okay.
too soon.
Okay,
It's
great.
actually great to be there and say, how did it go? You've been open now for this many days, how
Okay.
did it go? What's the story? Because the story in one building is probably going to be similar to the story in other buildings, you know, I mean, in terms of what that all looked like. It's just maybe scale is different, but if you're starting smaller and you're moving, you know, larger, then that I think would probably be helpful.
Okay, great. And then as far as what schools when, all that kind of stuff, I leave it in your hands.
We will organize that, yes. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. The next thing that I have highlighted on the agenda is committee meeting agendas and warnings. So we don't have a procedure for, you know, when do you submit the agenda to Darcy, the amount of lead time that you need, what information you need to provide her. And so there's been some inconsistency with the information that she has been receiving and the timing of that information. So this came up at our executive committee meeting on last Monday. And Dr. Baker suggested that they work on a procedure with a template that we use that would identify, you know, the time frame when you need to get the information in, and also this template would provide, this is what you need to provide. So I just wanted to highlight that here. This way we're all doing it consistently, which would make, you know, whoever's doing that role, whether it's Darcy or, you know, in the future, whomever, so much easier. So I just wanted to mention that would be something that probably over the summer into August, September timeframe would be happening. Okay, Chip?
Just comment on committees. The committees are different in that they have a different time frame. They have a different, like finance really depends on Matt to be pretty much helping us with the agenda, okay? Engagement committee is a little more board generated using the resources. Otherwise, negotiations obviously is not always happening, but yet comes with something different. So facilities, so we have to take all that into consideration, and I think it's really important that you factor whatever format you come up with and timing. Each committee has a little different way that it approaches or generates the agendas. So
Yeah, and I think, this isn't in any way, changing how you might develop a committee with, Matt or others that are working with your committee. It's just really what you hand off as chair to, make sure it gets warned. And the content and the thoroughness of that information. Mary Heather?
Yeah, I think it's just making sure that all committee chairs know their responsibilities in terms of what Darcy needs when. And with respect to minutes, other meeting materials, agendas, just so that we're making Darcy's job easier.
Right.
And because that's not the only, serving us is a fraction of the job that she has, so
Yeah.
we just want to do our best to.
Yeah. And it's a
To show our
procedure, so it's a good document to have as new board members come on. It's actually written down, so, we just have to refer to it. And, so I think in that sense, it's actually a good thing as well.
Can I
Chip?
just ask a question regarding that job? And Darcy doing it at this point, is that job, as someone pointed out, is not a dedicated job to the school board?
Or to the,
But we will hopefully be making sure that that job, however it is, that the school board has adequate personal contacts. Because over the years, there's only been 2 people that have done that job, okay?
One did it.
Huh?
One was there for.
One was there for 35 years or something like that. However, it's a very important part that you have, and this isn't passing any judgment on the people that have done it, but it is extremely important that the school board has that point person that is dedicated to them at least part of the time so that that all happens. And I just, even though we don't want to just keep expanding our employment numbers on the other side, I think that's a key element, so.
Yeah, we will be replacing that position. I think we've learned, we've tried now for a couple of months, right?
Okay.
To kind of,
Well, that was what I was hoping to hear.
I thought probably that's what you were going. So we have, for April, May, tried to assimilate some responsibilities across the team. And to some extent, I think that's been done very successfully. So it opens up opportunities for other pieces. But then again, if I'm doing the job where I'm out and about and others are too, that creates other areas of work that I think are really important to consider. So we will be filling that,
Okay, great.
and you will be taken care of well in that process. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along here. The next thing I'd like to do is just spend a little bit of time talking about S55, which is changes to the open meeting law. What I did is I put a handout in board pack, which I highlighted things that were particular to the board. And to make it a little easier, and I stole the VSBA weekly update to do that. So one of the things that right off the bat is on the first page of my handout, a municipality should post on its website, if it maintains one, and an expectation of the procedures for submitting notice of an open meeting law violation to the public body or the Attorney General. And they provided text for that, which is in the box on the handout if you're on board pack. So in this particular case, this needs to be in place by July 1st. And so I would like to propose and see what folks, what you think, that we go with the model language, obviously filling in our school district information at this point in time. And so we could have Emily and others, get this up on our website so that we meet this requirement of the open meeting law that's effective July 1st. Any thoughts about that?
Typically, we warn if we're going to accept a policy, we warn it for 10 days while we bring it to the board for conversation, then we have to legally warn a policy so that, for 10 days before it can be adopted.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sorry.
Are we
And I don't
required?
think
Is this
there's
a
any-
policy?
This is,
Is this a?
Is this a requirement, or is this just how we've done it in the past?
Well, is it a
It's-
policy?
I don't,
I wasn't considering it a policy.
Yeah, this is
This
just a
a legal
requirement.
requirement.
Yeah, this is more a,
Law.
it's a, yeah.
Procedure for the public.
Yeah, this is not.
I
a
guess
policy.
one of us could function that way too if we felt
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah, I wasn't viewing this, and the reason I put it in here, I wasn't viewing this as a policy. I was viewing this as a requirement that we had to do, and oh, by the way, they gave us language to help us do that.
It's a legal change.
It's a legal change, yeah.
so, may I?
Yes,
Follow up question?
Suzanne.
If we don't have it warned today as an action item, would we rewarn it for next time as an action item to approve it?
Does it need to be approved?
Well, why? What do we need to,
I mean, normally if we're given, I mean, we have a policy that's coming forward that's also in the past has been given. We've had other policies and pieces that have come through in state statute that we've approved as a board to take them on. I mean, especially where this is language by VSBA. I mean, yes, VSBA, we take most of their stuff. But we could do our own wording if we wanted to.
Was this not warned? Wasn't this warned with the meeting agenda?
It's just not warned as an action.
No, warned as an action.
It's action. I mean, we could wait until the next meeting. Obviously, we have time. Jason and then Steve.
So I'm not super concerned because this is not like a policy that we're adopting, right? This is a
Right.
mechanism for soliciting feedback about public meeting law violations on our website. And we don't approve every change to our website in a board meeting. so-
Right. Thank you. Steve?
My understanding is that this is a change in procedure, not in policy. And therefore, we don't have to follow the rigorous stuff that policy does. And so, VSBA model language for website posting requirements, I mean, they're telling us that they're giving us advice on how to do this procedure, not
Yeah.
saying that you have to pass a policy. So I think that what we're asking to do here is to change how we operate, not the policies that we follow. And I don't recall, because I watch policy, I don't recall a policy coming through saying that you have to change, that recommend that you change your policy. This was simply advice on how to handle the new legal requirements.
Yeah,
So
right.
I would feel comfortable you know, we at this point are discussing it.
Yeah.
And so I think the executive committee could change the procedures that they follow to do this without having to have a policy passed or even procedures passed by the board, because these are simply operating procedures.
Right.
So that's my opinion, though.
And my questions were not meant to roll a process. It was just clarifications and
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so at this point, my thought is that we utilize this language as opposed to handing it off to a committee to like draft up language. I think this is adequate for what we need, and that we would then have it posted on the website. But I wanted folks to know that was what we were going to do and where the origin of that came from. The rest of the information that's in here talks about the changes to the open meeting law. And one thing to keep in mind, as of June 30th, that original requirement where you always had 4 board meetings specifically, which is this group, that in the past you always had to have a physical location. Over the last 2 years, 3 years, we've had some board meetings that were virtual because of COVID, the relaxation due to COVID, so that goes away. So we now have a few other changes on top of that. They did make it very confusing by, to say the least. But when you go through this, school boards are not subject to have a hybrid meeting. We do have a hybrid meeting. Tonight we have a hybrid meeting, and there's no reason to change that fact. It's just we don't have to going forward. We always do need to have a physical location unless it's an emergency type situation where having a physical location is a hardship, right? And we have to react to something quickly. The part that's very confusing, and I was on a school board association call on Thursday with other board chairs, is this whole notion around advisory bodies. So one thing to keep in mind, our committees are local advisory committees, and as such, those committees can meet virtually, which is great, right? So you can schedule virtual meetings. And the other thing that we've talked about on Thursday and is written in here, a local non-advisory public body, we don't have to necessarily record those. The board meetings have to be recorded, but the clarification from the School Board Association, because we were all kind of confused on this call, was that you don't have to record a board, a committee meeting. But that doesn't mean that we don't continue to do that. It's just basically the way the procedure is. So that's, the highlights I wanted to point out. They will be coming up with some training on this as well. So that'll be something I'll definitely attend, and others, I would encourage us to attend, especially if you're a committee chair.
Just clarification.
Yeah.
From the other side, even though we will continue to do this, if in fact there's some mechanical electronic glitch, okay, that in fact we can still meet, but it's not out there, then we are not necessarily breaking the procedure.
Right.
There are minutes. We used to
Right.
take minutes. We still take minutes. So, I mean, it's not like
Right.
these aren't public.
Yeah, like if for some reason the owl or whatever, you can't, but if you did warn it as a hybrid meeting, it really needs to be a hybrid meeting though.
Use your phone then.
So people, because that's, the public's expecting it to be hybrid, if it's been warned as a hybrid meeting. Because they may be counting on it, and then all of a sudden we're
So
not there.
if, for my question, if in fact something happens with this system, then we have to abandon our meeting? That's my question, all right? It hasn't happened, but in actual fact,
It's not required.
when you have, maybe two attendees, I just want to make
Okay.
sure that we're
I think
clear
the-
on that. Maybe you can clear that up further with other discussion, but
I think the only thing you would need to make sure to do is just have the recording, which you could switch to audio. So you could have somebody could start recording something on their phones, and then that
Okay.
audio file could be uploaded. So because a hybrid meeting is not a requirement for you, then it's good practice, as you point out, to try to make sure that that's okay. But your business can be conducted if the hybrid portion of your meeting falls off.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to confirm that our practice is to keep the recording up longer than 30 days, right? We don't there's no reason for our system to have to take them down after 30 days.
Not so far.
Not so far, yeah. Yeah, and that wasn't, why I was bringing it up. It was just trying to sort out S55. Mary Heather?
Yeah, and just to follow up on Joanna's question, I mean, the full board meetings are to be recorded,
Yes.
and I don't know what the length is
It's
required.
30
Is it-
days
it's
there
30
as
days
well.
more.
A minimum of 30 days.
So I think in terms of like how long we keep it up, that's a question for Will Hatch and our IT capabilities and our storage capabilities. But I also don't know how long MCTV keeps theirs up. I mean, we have the
Long
luxury of
time.
having redundancies in
A
our
long
recording.
time. A long time.
Yeah.
I've gone back many, you know,
Yeah.
when I can't find it in ours.
So we're just lucky to have
Yeah.
that public service.
Exactly. Any other discussion on this? I'll keep you apprised if I learn anything different. So then, the next thing I wanted to briefly talk about is some retreat follow-up items. And again, this is in board pack. We, at the retreat, I presented the rules that basically, you know, showed up on that first page based on folks' input, right? And so the question I have is, there was 4 on that page. At a retreat, you can't decide what you're going to take on. So where do we draw the line on that page? Do we take all 3 of them, or do we take 3? Do we take 4? So I wanted some thoughts on that. And also, how do we initiate, I can't say the word, implementation of these? Some of them, to me, have to have some kind of procedure behind them. So I'm open for folks' thoughts on this. Tricia.
Weren't we waiting for another level of information from?
The rubrics from,
Rubrics, which I'll get on,
yeah.
I'll get Wednesday.
Okay, so those
Okay.
have not arrived yet.
So, and I'm happy to postpone this and, you know, we can talk about this at our next meeting as well, if that would be beneficial.
I think it would make sense to wait for the rubrics.
Yep. Okay, sounds great. And then, holding on one second here.
Barb, I was just going to
Yeah.
follow up on that.
Okay,
I mean,
go ahead.
I agree, and even just at our executive committee meeting when we were incorporating these things into the work plan, there's a couple of them that we held because
Right.
we're waiting on rubrics, and like the 4th one is one of them, so it sort of makes sense for us to have
Thank you.
better sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we'll follow, you know, hopefully by the next meeting, we can really then take it to the next level and decide how, exactly which one of these, of all of them, or 3 of them, whatever, we're going to actually put some implementation work behind. And then, based on the rubric, hopefully we'll have a little more guidance on what that work looks like. Because right now, I'm like, how would you do this on some of these? Ellen?
I just wanted to make a slight procedural suggestion on things like this, which is if there are questions, like when I had reviewed this, Barb, I didn't have in mind the questions you just asked. And I think it would be helpful if whenever these documents are submitted and uploaded to Board Pack, if there are prompt questions that are meant to like inform our discussion, just a little bit of prep on thinking about
Okay.
that might help us
Good question, good point.
organize
Yes,
thoughts.
good point. Let me just write that down. Okay, and the last item that I have is superintendent goal setting and evaluation process. So as we all know, part of the contract that we had with Mac and Jake included a phase 5, which is setting goals and objectives with our new superintendent. And so I did reach out to Judy because, you know, the time is coming up, right? And had some discussion with her. I also, per the suggestion at the retreat, I sent our existing procedure document for evaluations. I sent her a copy of that as well. And she's currently looking at that. And as some background, at the Hannaford Career Center, they had engaged Judy to write a procedure where they didn't have a procedure for superintendent evaluation. So she wants to talk to Dr. Baker and as well. She did mention that in August, she's going to be here because of Hannaford Career Center is having some training that she's conducting. So if in fact we could make it available, I think it's August 14th and 15th, she would be already here and we could take advantage of it. The concern I have of August, there's so many things happening with the school. There's the retreat, the beginning of school, all that kind of thing. And so I'm not sure, without that information, I was thinking September was probably a better time. So I have no, so it would be nice to do it in person, especially if we're going to talk a little bit more about procedure that we would have to pay her for. She would have to do a proposal on that part of it. So I just wanted to let folks know this is, is kind of what's happening right now. And once she's had a chance to talk to Dr. Baker, review our existing procedure for performance reviews, if in fact she recommends that we have benefits to do some modifications of our procedure, I will bring that up at the board meeting and we can then decide when it would be. I'm kind of thinking August might be too soon to do all of this, but we can see. Ellen?
It just occurs to me that if we don't do August, I think everything in this cycle starts in September.
Yeah.
So we'd probably want to rethink the timing on things like that. And just a general note, there's so many references to the board, but it feels like, to Steve's earlier point about the amount of work that the board has anyway, it feels like it would be there would have to be some subcommittee or some subset group of board members whose job would be really tracking this process just based on an early read of the level of involvement.
And currently, just to address that, it's my understanding the executive committee has been charged with doing that per our policies, that kind of thing. Being that committee that would actually be responsible for tracking the process. Jason?
That dovetails into my question, because policy 8.3 specifies the executive committee as that body. I'm wondering if there's any interest in having a dedicated superintendent evaluation committee like some Northwest does.
So repeat that again?
Creating a different committee.
Oh,
the supervision.
They have a committee specifically devoted to superintendent evaluation.
Right.
And it's not the executive committee, it's 5 out of their 11 members or something like that. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
Like an ad hoc committee.
well, it's a standing committee. They've added a standing committee.
Okay.
I don't think they meet every month, but it's.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would be a policy change for us if we should do something like that. Thoughts? What are people feeling? And we don't have, we're not deciding this tonight, but.
The reason I bring it up is just because I feel like the current process is like, it's just 3 people who do it and there's very little visibility and it's a little bit opaque. So,
yeah,
that's the motivation.
Chip?
I think I remember that the system that we've used, at least for the last time that I've been on this board, came out of Massachusetts somewhere. Does anybody else remember that? And, we haven't ever evaluated that system, and all districts struggle with how superintendent and the board can evaluate their performance.
Right.
So I don't know whether, certainly using consultants like Judy is important since she potentially has lots of experience in seeing how other places have done it successfully or not.
Right.
Okay, so.
Which is why we, at the board.
Yeah, so I'd be all in favor of utilizing that type of a consultant in that situation, just because it's very important, and it has to be transparent, and it has to be structured correctly.
Right, and with the proper input, right? Mary Heather?
Yeah, I think that, I sort of remember coming on to the board and very quickly, within a month or two, being involved in the superintendent evaluation process. So there's a couple things that I think need to be considered as, the timing of the goal setting and the review. But in the past, the way it was done, at least when I first came on the board, was, it was every board member was given a copy of the process that was followed and, or that was to be followed, and every board member had to respond to or sort of give their grade on the superintendent's performance. And then all of that was compiled, and then it was discussed in an executive session as a full board before the executive committee then took that stuff and met with the superintendent to deliver that. So it wasn't as opaque as, I'm sure you're probably concerned, it wasn't just, you know, the executive committee's opinion, it was the full board's input. The thing that was very much lacking was additional input, you know,
Yes.
sort of 360 input from staff and
Right.
other perspectives. So, so with respect to, you know, whether or not to have another committee, I'm not sure that's necessary if the procedure of the process is correct.
Right.
But that's just my opinion. So we need to work on that process for sure.
Okay.
Suzanne had her hand
Yeah,
up.
okay, Suzanne, and then Ellen, Steve. Did you say that?
So, to give a little more information to the process, so initially, when that process was designed, borrowed and designed, the superintendent would come to us at a board meeting and in the executive session would share what their goals were, ask for some feedback on them, and then we would then have some time, and then again, the superintendent would email us their documents with what they had done on their work, where they felt they were. Board members were asked, as Mary Heather said, to rate or to say where we felt. We would have a lengthy executive session where everyone put their feelings out on the table, and then it was then left to the executive committee to take all those comments and all of that after we went through every single item on the evaluation, and we would all come together and say, yes, maybe I put you as not proficient, but the majority of the board said you were proficient in it, so we're willing to go with proficient here, or need some work here, and we'd all work through that, and then that would be taken to the superintendent by the executive committee so that all voices were heard, both in talking about the initial goals and then the work that was completed for those goals. And then it was the executive group that brought it forward. But it's a lengthy process. I mean, when we had individual boards, each individual board was given a copy of the superintendent's evaluation. They then went through the same process, basically, of ranking and deciding with the superintendent how well they had done, and then it was brought forward through several more iterations before it finally made it to the superintendent. I think that at that point it was just the superintendent and the board chair that had that final conversation. So we have moved away from just a one-on-one conversation.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne.
Ellen.
Steve, oh, Ellen, and then Steve. Sorry.
I know we're going to talk about this at a future date, but I generally would agree with Jason, or I don't know if this was a suggestion, Jason, but I would agree with the idea of creating a dedicated committee to this. To read this procedure, it reads like something that should be really in-depth, that should be done gradually over time, that there are multiple steps of engagement and leadership from the board beyond just filling out a rubric. And if that's where the process had ended up the last time we did it, I would hope that we could, however this is modified, this sounds like something of like really involved goal setting, really involved like breakdown of what evidence will look like, what implementation of those goals will be, establishing new rubrics. I mean, that should be a body of work that I think is more than is reasonable to ask the executive committee to do, and that we should take very, very seriously beyond sort of filling out a piece of paper every year. And I agree with the idea that the evidence collected should probably be collected by more than just the superintendent, or there should be voices and input and perspectives that are incorporated that are more broadly representative of other people who work for the superintendent.
Thank you, Ellen. Steve?
Trying to draw a little bit from both my work with Dr. McTavish and my teaching experience, she very clearly said that if she's not meeting our expectations, to find out in her final evaluation something has gone horribly wrong.
Yes.
And so if we're not being formative in the way that we evaluate the superintendent and doing that on a constant basis, then we're not doing that right. If something has gone wrong, the time to talk about it is when it goes wrong, not waiting until the end of the year and doing the assessment. To speak to Jason's point, it might not be a bad idea to do an ad hoc committee to create the new procedures if we're going to do that, because that could be a lot of work, and to throw that at the executive committee and say, you guys have to come up with a system and do the evaluation seems a little unfair. Just from the standpoint of how much work this is going to be. As to whether we need a standing committee to do that formative assessments, as I was talking, perhaps we do, but maybe that's something that we need to decide once we've decided what the system is.
Right.
So maybe that's a later discussion, but I don't think it's a bad idea to put a committee together to create the system in the first place, because that could be a lot of work.
Okay. Do you want me to?
I would agree with what's been said. And regardless, I do think it does need policy attention. Because the last line is that the executive committee will evaluate and then share its findings with the board. And that doesn't feel quite appropriate at this point. So I do think it needs a policy review.
So next, next steps on this is obviously Judy's looking at this. She's going to actually, I think she has some time scheduled with you this week even, I believe, what she told me today. And so, based on that collaboration there, she'll come back with some recommendations of what we might want to consider, or she might come back and say, hey, this is perfect or whatever. So then at the next meeting, I can give a report out on that. And then we can start to walk down that path. At a minimal, even if we have the current policy or procedure in play, we do need to schedule that phase 5 of the contract so that we have goal setting and also objectives, and utilize her help, whether we bring her back here or we do it virtually with her, that kind of thing. So if we're doing more work with her than just that, we may want her to be here physically, but we can decide that once we know what it's going to look like. So I just wanted to let you know, give you an update of what I know at this point in time. Any other questions? Thank you. So that's all I had. So the next thing we'll move to is report of the board and under policy. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Okay, thanks. There was 2 and now 3 policies to discuss. So we basically wanted to just bring these to have a discussion with you. We're not going to vote on them tonight. Both of these actually have been kicking around for a while, and when Suzanne was chair, when Joanna was on the committee, they also had a role in this, so feel free to chime in, anyone. The first one's C9. That would replace, so the one we're discussing tonight would replace our current policy called Comprehensive Wellness. The Agency of Education has renamed it Local Wellness Policy. I'll just say a few things briefly. The early adoption of this policy was rather confusing. That was my experience of it anyway. But basically we got the message that our policy, or even our current policy, was actually pretty good and was met a high standard. And so what we ended up doing in the end is amending some of what the AOE suggested and then adding a significant chunk which is in red. at the bottom of your policy, the one you're on the agenda for today. I'll say briefly that we did make one proposed change under Part 10, physical education and activity. The suggestion there was to add a sentence in about unstructured outdoor physical activity within the school day. The previous policy, it was a little confusing the way it was written. The way the policy was written before allowed unstructured play to take place within or outside the school day. And so we thought it was important to, which, as I understand it, we already do. So it's not, we don't require any big change in anything anyone's doing. And then the administrative responsibilities that I think are really interesting, they're worth pointing out. The first one under red, under 1, is to convene a local wellness team that includes parents, students, school, food program personnel, etc., physical education, teachers, and all these other folks, professionals, social workers, to basically figure out, that would help draft a procedure for this policy and help ensure that it's implemented well. So it's a long policy, and I don't know if people read it through it beforehand, but comments, questions that our committee should take back?
Jason and then Brian.
Yeah.
Jim, what is the significance of the bolded sections versus the unbolded sections?
So the bold says, it's even bold on our current policy, which I didn't know until today. But that says the bold italicized text follows the Federal Child Nutrition Act policy. Okay. So it's just like, as I understand it, boilerplate stuff that is from that act.
It's stated under 9 right there.
Yes, yeah.
That's the only, and then the boldness, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not italicized anymore.
Okay. But you were suggesting a change to 10C, or was it 10B?
10B. So, yeah, well, yeah, it was the B and C. So the C was then to pull out the thing about recess specifically. It was sort of used to be in B, we basically added C.
So you're saying that you're pulling out and making sure that recess may not be denied or withheld as its own separate line item?
Yes, I'm trying to remember why we took that out of the B thing. There was originally, the sentence was much longer. Originally it stated recess may not be denied or withheld except for in coordination with parents or school personnel or whatever. But I think it was Dr. Nugent who let us know that that's always the case. There's always ways in which certain kinds of student curricular models or those kinds of things would take precedence over this kind of policy anyway. And so we didn't feel the need to further stipulate that in that sentence. This would, would it be run by our lawyer? Did we talk about that? I can't remember.
I don't think this specifically has been run by
Pietro. So we could run it by Pietro if people thought that was useful. What else? Brian, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. This is in regards to C9, the local wellness policy. The first little section, first 4 lines are dealing with purpose. What I need to understand is the relationship of the next paragraph to what we're discussing. The revisions, goals, procedures, and programs related to this policy have been and will be developed in consultation with. I need to know whether that's been done or whether it doesn't have to be done or it should be done.
Yep. Well, it says it has been done. I don't know. It says that on our policy as our current policy as well. So there's no change there, but I think,
There are all kinds of changes that have been made to the policy. Those are revisions.
sure, what do you?
So Brian, the first wellness policy that we had, there was a wellness committee of school nurses, et cetera, that worked on that initial one. And unbeknownst to us, the state, when there's a national policy on wellness and health, they sort of borrowed ours as the gold standard, but they didn't tell us that. What they told us was that we had to adopt the state one
That's right.
and replace ours with the state one. But initially, ours did have a committee, and within this policy at the very end, it continues with the fact that there still needs to be a committee continuing to work on this.
Right, but my understanding is that these revisions need to be made in connection with information provided by these various sources, not without that.
You mean like the revisions we're talking about tonight?
Yeah.
Mary Heather?
I guess I'll just follow up on that because I sort of remember, and maybe Suzanne, you can illuminate for us, but when the board was first notified that the wellness policy was coming up and it was a big task for the policy committee, I have a recollection, and maybe it's just made up in my mind, but that Caitlin had talked about, like there were staff from the district who were coming together, including Laura Nugent, others. So I'm wondering if that is the information that Brian is seeking, like which professionals in ACSD representing PE, school health professionals, came together to help consult the committee on these revisions.
So
do we know the answer to that?
I can't tell you the names that were on that committee because Laura and Caitlin did
But there
work.
were folks.
There were folks.
who looked
There were
at these
folks in our
revisions.
policy that worked on it. There were folks
Yeah.
that Laura and Caitlin worked at, and then Laura then brought all of their information to the committee, and
Yeah.
she has continued to bring it to the committee.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the revisions that have been made were made in conjunction with information provided by other people.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that's true,
Okay.
What'd you say?
Okay. Yeah, well, the
Go
thing
ahead,
I was going to
Joanne.
add is Dr. Nugent did express that she wished she could have put together a more robust group to, like representative more stakeholders like students, parents, school, I mean, she worked with the committee, so, but in general public. So she did note that those were missing from that, but this policy dictates putting together a wellness team and also a procedure, which we don't have, like, we're not working from one right now, we don't know if there's one.
I guess, so my guess is that this group has got to decide whether it's going to follow this completely and add those people in the consultation stage, or say, in this case, we are not going to do it.
Yeah, so, the policy is our part. The procedure then gets turned over to operations.
I think what I'm hearing Brian say is relative to this second paragraph. So if there are revisions to this policy, it should have parental consultation as well as, representatives of the folks that, do various aspects of that. I think what I'm hearing is that Laura's advice is that was done incompletely.
I mean, if you consider board members having multiple hats, like being a parent, then you could consider the policy committee members at the time as being a parent voice, but not explicitly. Yeah.
I guess I don't think Laura thinks that was incomplete, that process. I guess it's not, I don't think she would say that. I think, it's kind of, there is a sort of a more the merrier element to it in some way. We heard from administration, we heard from parents, did you make a public comment on this during one of our things?
Yes, but I wasn't asked to.
Okay, that's important, thank you, important distinction. We heard from a physical education teacher in the district, I guess
Health
from,
teacher.
what?
Health teacher.
Wellness teacher. I'm not saying,
I think she reached out to school nurses.
I don't think she, well, she maybe talked to Laura, she didn't, I didn't talk to her, yeah. So I'm not sure where we are. I guess my feeling is you raised an interesting point, Brian. I think this, and I'm by no means trying to defend any of this, we will gladly go back to the drawing board if that's what people think is important. This convening of this local wellness team, which does include parents, students, and all those people we just said, is like a pretty important part of this. That if it was incomplete in previously, is absolutely central now. It seems important.
There's nothing that prevents me from establishing this committee right when we get going. You know, I think this is probably an August, right thing. I'm not sure that anybody is in the mood for volunteering for committees right this minute. But I think we could get there once we get closer to the opening of school. And the first task of that committee could certainly be to take a look at this, give any feedback as necessary, and then you could put it on your adoption for the fall. And I don't think you've lost any ground by doing it if that's your pleasure.
Jamie, I'd just like to say that I was not trying to give you a hard time.
No.
Point out something.
No, I hear you.
Okay, Suzanne, and
No,
then...
Mary Heather.
Oh, she was first, Mary Heather?
Well, I just, is there a deadline for us for approving this? Imposed by the state?
I thought it was
That
supposed to
should
be
be-
by the end of this year.
You mean by the end of the school year?
Yeah.
I mean, that should also be,
Well, I think
Consider-
that was, sorry.
Go ahead.
That was, I think that timeline had to do with the misunderstanding of that we didn't have a wellness policy in place. There was a huge misunderstanding, but because we have this already established, that deadline, I don't think applies to us.
gotcha.
Right. I think that would...
I mean, yes and no. Our wellness policy is
Oh, yes.
Expired.
That's a thing.
in need of,
I mean, I guess I don't
Yeah.
want to gloss over the inclusion of folks who should have been included.
yeah.
But I also want to emphasize the workload of the policy committee and probably the stacks of other policies that are expired or about
Yeah,
to
right.
expire, that work needs to get done, and is it possible to move forward and assemble the required folks to make a procedure and start moving in the right direction? That's all.
So, yeah, and, from the policy, it's expired only because it's beyond the 3-year period, right?
Yeah.
So we have a policy.
When you say expired, do you mean it needs revision?
Revision.
It's 3 years,
It needs to be
We're supposed
readopted.
to be.
every 3 years.
Yes, but your policy on the books is
It's
what
still
is to be
there.
followed. It
Yes.
doesn't
Yes.
drop off.
Right.
But as a
Exactly.
board, we have an obligation to revisit our policies on schedule, and once we fall behind on that schedule, the policy committee gets overburdened with work.
Yes,
So,
yes, definitely. Ellen and then Suzanne?
I think if Wendy's willing to pull people together and relatively quickly give this a read, I would rather know that the policy is rock solid before we adopt it and then be focusing on the procedural stuff. If we have that leeway, it seems smarter to be more prudent in making sure that the full measure of stakeholders who would be able to inform, and it sounds like had prior to this informed a gold standard wellness policy. So we know that it's a process that has success. Anyway, I think let's make sure the policy is really, really solid before we adopt it and then try to move fast. And I think I'm new to the policy committee, but that feels like it just helps us more to know that there are that many different thoughtful viewpoints coming into reading something that's already had so much work done to it.
And Suzanne?
The only other piece I'm going to add is that part of what the state added into ours was the new National Education of the Child and Nutrition Act pieces, and most of that is under nutrition services, nutrition guidelines. So whenever those were supposed to take effect, if we don't have them in our policies, then we are kind of out of sync with national laws around nutrition, and that's a lot of what's in the bold piece.
I think they're currently in our policy.
They are all in our policy?
Yeah. Number 11.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is we will, that's my fire alarm. There is a fire in Waybridge. Okay. I will.
Everybody's okay?
Need to run?
No, I can, let me just stop this.
Let's make sure it's not your house.
Yeah, right. That's
not-
all right. I went to a wedding once and the groom's pager went off, and halfway through his vows, he went running out the door.
I will not abandon this policy debrief.
Too many vows, right?
Anyway, we'll take it back. We can work with Wendy on the thing that Ellen just said, basically, and try to. I agree with what you said, Ellen. Should try to get it solid, and then hopefully, I mean, the policy committee as a committee will not meet again until August, so it'll be a while, but we'll just keep on plugging along with this. Okay, next one is A20, which is about board meeting agenda preparation and distribution. This one seems more straightforward, though it was a little bit confusing because we were working off two different versions at one time. One that I had drafted and one that Tim had edited. And let's see if we... So basically one of the main discussions around this policy was in the part called agenda preparation. As you can see, there was a crossed out sentence and a bolded sentence. So this was changed to say that the executive committee, in consultation with the superintendent, will prepare proposed agendas for the meetings, which was different than the superintendent doing it.
That's the board chair.
No, well, it says here the superintendent will prepare. That was
After
crossed out.
consultation with the board.
I think there was some discussion and clarity because the superintendent, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, does actually type out the agenda or something. I can't remember what the confusion was, but we changed it to say that it's an executive committee decision in consultation with the superintendent, which my understanding is actually how it happens.
Yeah.
Okay, great. There's a bold paragraph below that says the board will follow an annual agenda planning cycle, blah, blah, blah. That is taken from our current A8 policy, which we considered migrating over to this policy. That policy is about agenda development also. So this policy, A20, would replace our current A8. I put it in bold because after going back and forth, a few of us were like, why is this here? Like, should this be here in this policy?
In essence, this is the work plan
Yes.
that the executive committee has been working on for board review.
Yeah. It seemed to me a little outside the purview of agenda preparation and distribution, but
So you mean we'd have a different policy?
no, we would just retire this paragraph. Like we retired other parts of A8 that we did not.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. There actually is some part of A8 which we should have kept in here. So A8, our current A8 policy, and this is just, I can't remember if we discussed this in our last 2 meetings ago, but our current A8 policy stipulates that 3 board members can petition to have an agenda item placed on the agenda. And somehow in the shuffling of edited versions, that sentence was lost. And I just wanted to put that out there as something that maybe should put back in here.
As part of A8 or as part of?
As part of the new A, there's no more A8, like this would replace A8. So
A8 will be retired.
A8 would be retired, this will replace A8, but we can keep some of the good stuff, whatever you think of as good, from A8 to this new A20.
But currently A8 is still on the books until we retire it.
Right.
Yes.
Are you considering retiring it or
Yes.
repealing it?
Oh, I see, yeah.
So Dr. Baker had a question. Could you repeat that?
Just, are you retiring it or repealing it? You know, it's, I think that's,
What is the difference in your mind?
yeah. Well, a repeal is like, okay, it's gone. You know, it's now really gone, whereas retire is like for a while, or?
I think it will be replaced.
So I think
Isn't
it's.
that?
It would be a
I think it's
repeal.
repealed.
Yeah.
I
So
think
you're
it's
picking,
repealed.
you're editing A20 to be comprehensive, and then you would repeal A8 to
Right.
remove it from
That's-
the
Yeah, and I think in
That's
board
my
action,
understanding,
that's what
yeah.
you state.
Okay, that's what you're
Right.
saying, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure we're using the same language.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Joanna.
Well, if the plan is to repeal A8, then I guess I would want to consider maintaining that language with the request of 3 board members to add an agenda item. I feel like that's the only thing in our well, go ahead.
I think it was left off accidentally, frankly. Like Tim and I were doing different versions, and I think in his version, I don't know how it happened, but my memory is that it was left off accidentally.
Okay.
So what do people, just so feedback, what do people think about this paragraph, the board will follow an annual planning cycle, that's in bold at the bottom? Does that seem like it should be part of this policy or not?
Very Heather.
I think it makes sense.
You
It's
do?
basically, like Barb was saying, sort of specifying that a work plan will be developed, and I think that's good practice. It makes sense to me to have the policy state what the practice ought to be. But maybe I'm saying that because we were just working.
Yes. We spent so much time on
But
it.
it sort of makes sense to me, so
Okay.
I'll just put that out there.
Well,
Go ahead, Chip.
the word annual agenda planning cycle, to me, says it should stay in. Agenda planning, which is what this
Right.
preparation and whatever, so to me, it makes sense that it would stay in, although I understand where you're sort of coming from,
Yeah, okay.
but
That would be erring on the side of caution since we already have it in our other policy anyway, so that's good. Okay, so, yeah,
A quick question, just looking at A8 really quickly, maybe this isn't important, but if we're talking about shelving A8 and collapsing the pieces of it that we would want to retain into A20, something else that's in A8, I don't know if this was discussed, is about minutes shall follow Robert's Rules of Order. There's just like a procedural piece in there about how the minutes are kept.
yeah.
So I don't know if that's essential or not, but it would be another thing maybe to consider migrating over to A20 before we shelve A8.
Possibly instead of doing that, we could just cite open meeting law. Because
Like
it's,
they'll be taken in compliance with open meeting law.
Yeah.
But just something about the minutes should maybe be in there. I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, and
I would-
expectation
I would,
about the
yeah.
format, yeah.
because,
Okay.
and that way, whatever the state of open meeting law is
Yeah,
yeah,
implied.
yeah.
okay.
Suzanne?
But by state statute, boards run by Robert's rules, and the information about the vote should be in there, how the vote was taken. I believe by Robert's rules that, you know, if you're doing a ballot, you're doing a voice vote, and then in voice vote, you have to say, you know, if somebody abstains or says no, you have to list those names.
Yeah, it's true.
So I just have A8 in front of me. It says minutes shall follow Robert's Rules of Order. The final wording of the motions as amended and adopted or rejected shall be noted. As appropriate, points of discussion may be as appropriate, points of discussion may be noted. Information about the vote, voice counted, roll call ballot shall be recorded. That's a specific, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, Suzanne, but that's the specifics of what's in A8 about just like essential information that needs to get recorded in the minutes.
Mary Heather?
Yeah, so I guess I would agree with both. Either just keep the language as preserved in AA and shift it on over, or specify Robert's rules rather than open meeting law. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I guess I would probably use Robert's Rules of Order because that's what's stated in statute.
Sure.
Okay. I can make these adjustments, these
Yeah, I'm
edits.
taking notes too.
Oh, great. And we can sort of hopefully finalize this guy at our August meeting. Thanks for all the input. The last one is much easier. It is the public participation at board meetings policy. As I said at the beginning, I just wanted to say that seemed to be a lot of interest in this recently from a few different folks. We talked about it when Karam was here. We basically reviewed our policy, and Wendy was at that meeting also, and we basically came to the conclusion that the policy is pretty good, and that any changes to how we conduct public policy would be, public comment, would be more dealt with in procedure.
And just,
Yes,
I
go
mean,
ahead, Nicola.
part of that is because there's nothing in the policy that dictates the order by which public comments occur. It just says that we have to make time available for public comment. So the procedure of when the timeline is really, or the structure of when that happens is really a procedural one and not so much a policy one.
Okay,
And
go ahead, Chip.
does that relate at all to the interaction with the public? Two-way interaction? Because that was where the discussion came up in that the public comment, whether it's on agenda items or on non-agenda items, and what kind of
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
So
think there's
that-
anything in policy that limits engagement with the public. And other than there being note of the chair shall rule out of order any presentation to the board which breaches the privacy or other rights of students, parents, etc. So there's to the ability for us to exchange and interact with the public, that limitation isn't written in our policy.
right, it is, I know it isn't, but
I believe in state statute because we follow Robert's rules, that's where it is. Because it is our meeting, it's not a meeting of the public. And so the public is being invited to come and give input, comments, but it's not their meeting, it's our meeting.
Robert's rules doesn't restrict us speaking. I mean, there are lots of government entities that follow Robert's rules of order that allow exchanges with the public. I don't think that's actually in Robert's rules that you can't engage.
that's been our contention
Right.
that we've dealt with.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the public,
yeah, I
whatever,
agree.
it's that, okay? So, I mean, we have to figure out how that is, whether it's in procedure or otherwise, okay? It's still important.
I mean, yeah, we sort of discussed that, and we're like, that's a procedural thing. Joanna, you're the one writing the procedure from the community engagement?
The plan is to bring it to the committee at some point. Go ahead, Tricia.
Right, well, I was just going to say, yes, we asked Joanna to look over the draft. I was just looking at it, from 2022, the draft communications plan. So yes, an effective procedure outline of how we interact with the public.
So yeah, I think when you do that, that will be a more interesting discussion.
And that will be in
Yeah,
our
in a good way, I mean, yeah.
a week from tomorrow is our next meeting.
Okay.
That's on the agenda.
Cool.
Mary Heather.
Well, I was just gonna revisit that. My understanding was that the draft from 2022 was being taken to the policy committee to get their feedback on whether or not it jived with policy, and then it was coming back to our committee for further work.
I think
Is that correct?
the steps that we had talked about, to review back to communication and engagement, was to have Joanna look it over with an eye to what would need to be updated as to what has changed in the ensuing time since this was originally drafted. And then once those changes were made, for it to policy, to have them look it over and give us their feedback as to
Okay.
yay, nay.
Well, yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. We can totally do that.
It's coming, Jamie.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, any other discussion? So with A20 and C9, it sounds like C9, we won't be adopting that at our next meeting. Is A20 possible to be adopted with the minor changes?
Well,
Or do we need
We won't be
This is
meeting
first
again.
read.
The policy committee isn't meeting again. Do we need to?
I'm not saying we have to. Will this be on the agenda for adoption, is my question.
Gotcha.
I don't know the legal answer to that. Like, can we do that? Like, we can add stuff from A8, which we've just discussed, and I can bring a revised version of that. That's fine. But if people, is that okay?
It won't have gone through the policy committee.
They want to go through the policy committee.
So-
But we all
We'll
just-
have a final, the 10-day review.
Yeah, it sounds like we should wait.
They won't have what, Suzanne?
It has to, so a final, policy that's going to be finalized and adopted has to be out there for 10 days
Right,
in its final
Right.
It's final
state.
form.
right.
Before the second reading.
Before you can vote
Okay.
or adopt it.
I mean, if I did it tomorrow, that would be 10 days
But that would
before.
be you doing it and not the committee.
Yeah, okay. So the question is, do we need to have a committee meeting to make those edits? Or can we make the edits based on our discussion tonight?
It's the committee's way.
I just don't know the answer. I'm happy for any answer. I just don't know what it is, so.
Laura's not.
What?
She seems like the committee's.
She was on virtual.
Okay.
I think procedurally, you can make the edits based on the discussion tonight. It's really about how you work as a board, if you want to allow that, or if you want to ensure that all edits are done by committee.
I would ask if people are comfortable just to do that, knowing that the policy committee meets once a month, there's a world of work coming. If we could keep this moving at the board level and not kick it through the committee again where, even if we're fast, it's still like one of three things that we'll end up talking about in the meeting.
Jason?
But we cannot make on ad hoc adjustments in the meeting or amend policy, right? Whatever's one, the final
Right.
thing has to.
It's like a yes or no.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
Well, and this would be another version that comes to us at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be adopting it the next meeting, is my understanding. We'd get another update, but we wouldn't wait until August. Am I hearing that correctly?
That's what I thought.
It basically is the committee's call, I believe. If the committee, if Jamie as the committee chair makes the revisions and shares it with the rest of the committee and they independently give feedback and then he warns it with sufficient time for the board to
It has
warn
to be-
in public,
I don't
then
think we can do
in
that.
theory, yes.
It has to be
we can take
warned
action.
as a board meeting.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, to Mary Heather's point, my understanding is that that level of communication in private, not in public, is actually not the right thing to do.
Right,
So, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
so maybe the most cautious, safe thing, I agree with Ellen. Like, I kind of think that it would be useful to just do it. For me to make these revisions based on our open and public discussion tonight and bring it to you guys for a second read next meeting would be great. But if people feel like that's not the best thing, then we can wait.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I just don't think we would be adopting it. That would then start the 10-day window,
Okay,
because we'll see a new copy,
yeah,
which wouldn't happen until August, so it'd be more than 10 days.
okay. I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment, any topic. So is there anyone in the room or on Zoom that is interested in making a public comment? Mary.
Hi, Mary Slozar. You guys covered a lot of ground tonight, and I just wanted to follow up on some of the things I heard in case I have some helpful perspective. One, on the issue of our SLPs and school counselors. I've heard so many members on this school board talk about their concern around retention, and I just want to highlight that as an issue with this. I know of at least one school counselor that could have been retained if she was given the right terms. There's an SLP who went to Virgins. These aren't people that are, moving out of state or retiring. So let's think about that, and maybe moving forward, what are we doing to keep people happy in here? Because we have awesome people that we don't want to lose. Going on the visiting schools, I just wanted to follow up on what Steve shared, because I think we heard that perspective from Bjarki when he came and spoke on this issue. And I think just as a reminder, what I remember from the spirit of his comment was that we have to really think about why you're coming to the school. And if you're there to actually learn about what the teachers are doing, or if you're there to see what the students are doing, if you want to see what the students are doing, go during the day. If you want to, right, so being really thoughtful about why you're there so that the teachers aren't, and the principals aren't doing a song and dance. On the committee procedures, another idea there is that you could go to friends meetings. There's if you want to see parents, that's the place to go to see parents, if that's who you're interested in seeing. On the committee's procedures that you all talked about, I just wanted to highlight, and this actually came up later in discussion, there's great variety in how committees take minutes. Some people just write a little blurb giving a little quick summary, and other people provide minutes, and so you might want to think about what your procedure is around that. I wanted to mention that the recordings are actually housed on YouTube, so I don't see any reason for them to ever be taken away for your board meetings. On the wellness policy, 2 quick points and then I'll zip it. The recess not being denied or withheld, I think, is extremely important because it is being denied and withheld in our schools currently. And I think it's also important to be explicit that it's in whole or in part, because the way it's being denied and withheld is by stealing minutes as kind of punishment for kids not behaving the way the teacher wants them to. So you might need to be explicit about in part. And then finally, I really appreciate Brian pointing out this issue about engaging parents and students and other stakeholders in revising the policy, primarily because that's a perfect example of how we have so many policies and procedures that nod to engagement. So it's there in policy, but is not actually happening. So there has to be some real intentionality around how to get that. And my point saying that I wasn't asked, I think, is an important one. Other parents weren't asked either. I just happen to have privilege to show up to these meetings. And something you might consider that I see the select board in Middlebury doing is they have actual non-board members of the community on their committees advising them about things. So you could have other members, you could have some of those stakeholders always there. You could also have an advisory committee or advisory council that has those stakeholders that you always turn to. So there's really an institutionalized way to get that input. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Okay, at this point, it's time for adjournment, so can I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
A second? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you. Sorry.